Protect kids from the radical gender ideology and say no chemical or surgical gender transition before you're 18.
So we're so adamant about parents' rights, but in this particular case, parents who say that along with the doctors, that what is best for their kids, what their kids feel most comfortable with doing is a gender transition, that the parents should not be allowed to do that for their kids.
Look, the state has the obligation to see to the safety and health and well-being of the people of the state. And I accept that. I take your point. I take your point.
No, it's not a point, it's a question. It's a question.
What we have afoot in America is a radical gender ideology that has taken hold in our schools, it's taken hold in our universities. It is afoot across the nation.
Mike Pence, who will never be the president, even if he's the last person left on earth, has some thoughts about transgender children and how he thinks that it is wrong to allow children to go through gender-affirming care, despite the fact that he's perfectly fine with torturing kids in conversion therapy. Aside from that, he wants you to know that he actually cares about protecting the children. But let's actually talk about what's going on across the nation and the anti-trans bills that have come up this year. So let's pull up this image. So 2023 anti-trans bills tracker shows that in 2023, anti-trans bills continue to be introduced across the country. It's an organization that tracks legislation that seeks to block trans people from receiving basic healthcare, education, legal recognition, and the right to publicly exist. So there's been 556 bills in 49 states, 83 passed, 369 are still active, and 104 have failed. So it's not just the rhetoric that he's giving on stage. And even though he will never be the president, there is force behind this attempt to enshrine bigotry into our laws and to restrict the civil rights of trans people in America. And let's look a little more closely at that from the Associated Press. By the latest count, at least 20 states have imposed bans or limits on transgender athletes' participation at the K-12 or collegiate level. And at least 18 states have adopted laws or policies, including some blocked by courts, barring gender-affirming medical care, such as puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgery for minors. And aside from his continued insistence on being the anti-trans candidate, Pence was asked about his old boss and current enemy, Donald Trump. So let's look at how that went for him.
So I want to ask about some breaking news. Tonight, the Justice Department recently informed Donald Trump's legal team that he is a target of a federal investigation into possibly mishandling classified documents. I should say you were cleared last week in your own documents case. What's your reaction to the news about your former boss?
Well, let me say the handling of classified materials is a very serious matter.
Investigation into obstruction, which you clearly did not do. If that is something that investigators see as possible, even enough potentially to indict the former president, do you think that that should go forward?
Well, I would hope not. Number one is I think it would be terribly divisive to the country.
The handling of classified documents is extremely important, which is why I was the vice president for the biggest doofus the RNC could find in the parking lot of an LA tan, because I value those documents. I mean, there's more that he said, but first I want to bring you in on these first two points, Bennie. That first, of course, his attacks on transgender children, specifically and adults as well, and his attempt to insulate Donald Trump while weirdly trying to distance himself. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to get across the most important thing to understand when it comes to transition-related care, but especially for trans youth. It's literally just puberty, right? I need everyone to fully understand that hormone therapy for trans youth is literally just puberty. Every puberty has risk, whether or not it's cis puberty or trans puberty. And it turns out, I know this is a big surprise, the effects of estrogen are pretty consistent on people, and the effects of testosterone are pretty consistent on people, regardless as to whether or not somebody is cis or trans. So the whole thing is, just making sure that kids are able to go through the puberty they're the most comfortable with at the normal puberty age. If cisgender kids can tolerate puberty, then guess what? So can trans kids. It turns out that it's actually not more complicated than that. Anybody that wants to fearmonger about permanent side effects, you know what has permanent side effects? Okay, going through puberty. I know, what a shocker. Oh my God, this is the first time we're learning this, right? Because apparently we live in a country that's filled with children that are just paranoid about anything that they don't fully understand. So yes, it's literally quite that simple. It is just about making sure that kids are able to go through whichever puberty they're the most comfortable with, and it's just that basic. Taking that away is horrifically evil. Because imagine you're like a teenage boy or whatever, and somebody's forcing you to take estrogen against your will. It turns out you'd probably be pretty upset about that. That is literally what's happening to trans men across the country. And I understand the focus on like the bills targeting trans kids because there's more of them, but there are a couple states that have tried to effectively ban trans care for adults as well. Missouri tried to do this, Florida tried to do this. This is more than just, oh, we're protecting children. This is quite literally people who are trying to exterminate trans people. They do not want trans people to exist safely in society, right? And so you can see that with the bathroom bills, for example, where if you do use the bathroom that they want you to use, you will still get hate crimed and get the police called on you. And then as for like defending Donald Trump, of course, Mike Pence is gonna defend Donald Trump because at the end of the day, right? The entire Republican Party is just a party of cowards, right? That is it. They are the party of cowardice. Every single thing that they do is built out of fear and terror of some mythical other, fear and terror that this big, strong man might criticize them on Fox News. Oh my God, right? And it's just so pathetic, right? And they're pathetically dangerous. And that I think really encapsulates the entire Republican Party. So of course, they're gonna like shrug about like, oh yeah, Donald Trump with the classified documents. Because at the end of the day, they are just an entire party of pathetic cowardice that is turned into just this dangerous vitriolic hatred.
Yeah, and it's particularly pathetic when it comes to Republicans, shying away from criticizing Trump, because that he's not gonna shy away from criticizing them. Trump doesn't care that you were his former vice president. That's not gonna stop him from calling you Mini Mike or something like that on the debate stage. There's gonna be an onslaught of attacks on you from Trump. I mean, we saw yesterday he photoshopped Chris Christie's speech so that he looked like he was delivering it at a buffet. I mean, this does not care if you play nice with him. It's not gonna stop him from attacking you. But let's get to this last point that was touched on at the town hall for Mike Pence. He was asked about the gun violence epidemic, and to remind everyone watching, gun violence recently became the #1 cause of death in children in the United States. Gun violence is the #1 cause of death of children in the United States, according to the CDC. But here is what Mike Pence had to say when asked about gun violence.
Go back to something you said about expediting the processing of people who engage in mass shootings. A lot of people who are mass shooters, they go in with the intention to die. So how would the threat of execution be a deterrent?
Well, I follow these stories just as closely as you do. And of course, our years in the White House, we saw one tragedy after another. And I know we hear that and we see evidence oftentimes in the aftermath that they went in without regard to whether they would survive. But I just believe in the deterrent of the law.
He believes that somehow somebody who goes in to commit a mass shooting with the full intention of either killing themselves or being killed by the police at the end of it is gonna be deterred from doing so because there's a law that says we're gonna execute you if you do this. For the love of God, Mike, that's what they want. They want to die. And I'm sorry, these aren't rational thinkers. These are people who are committing mass murder. There's no rationality behind that. These people are insane. You think that they're gonna read that, Indiana passed a law saying that you can get the death penalty for committing mass murder. You think that's gonna stop them from committing mass murder? They were gonna commit mass murder. They're not rational actors. For the love of God, you moron, you fly-headed moron. So once again, he was just stumped and he had to give that gibberish answer. And There's a problem here though for Mike Pence. So let's pull up this headline from The Independent. Mike Pence would rather see armed school guards than gun control reform. So Pence would rather that we punish the shooters after the fact than prevent the mass shooting, right? His deterrence of law, bogus BS answer, by the way, as I think I just maybe articulated as I was pissed off about it. But then he wants to just punish the shooter after they've already done the killing. Good job, Mike. Big brain stuff coming out of here. Some might say galaxy brain stuff, right, Bennie?
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to understand that, look, mass shootings are a central part of right-wing governance, right?
Yeah.
Like like any type of like public violence, randomized violence, these different types of like terrorist type things that happen, they are a central part of right-wing governance. Because fundamentally, if you look at who the mass shooters very often target, it is marginalized people and vulnerable people. And they create this climate of fear. And it helps Republicans on two fronts. One, the climate of fear helps them bolster the police state and all of the lovely things that they use to oppress marginalized people on that level. And then also, when you realize that a lot of these people are white supremacists that commit these different mass shootings and stuff like that, you start to realize that, oh, by targeting marginalized people, they're making marginalized people more afraid to actually exist in public. And that is something that the right wing absolutely loves. And so the reality is, it's not just that Republicans don't want to do anything to stop these mass shootings, it's that Republicans actively benefit from them. And that is why they refuse to do anything against it, on top of the layers of just the profits for gun companies and things of that. Like, at the end of the day, mass shootings, randomized violence, things like this are a central part of right-wing governance, and they always have been.